لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم صل على حبيبنا ونبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم في الأولين وصل اللهم وسلم وبارك على حبيبنا ونبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم في الآخرين. اللهم صل على حبيبنا ونبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم كلما ذكره الذاكرون الأبرار وكلما غفل عن ذكر الغافلون. All praise due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who knows what we reveal and knows what we conceal and even knows what the animals feel. We thank Him, we praise Him, and on Him we have reliance. It is to Him we only turn to for true guidance. We ask Him to send His peace, His blessings, His mercy on the best of human beings and prophets, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, on whom we praise until the very end of our days. We ask Him for steadfastness, guidance, mercy, and to never lead us astray, and for Him to save us on Judgment Day. Welcome, alhamdulillah, to our sessions of icons, leaders of faith, discussing Imam Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah ta'ala. As we discussed the first two Imams, Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik rahimahumullah ta'ala. And the reason why is because they impacted, of course, the lives of every single Muslim that came after them. Is impacted by the lives of these people. And of course, understanding why and what made them be impactful is very important. One of the most important things to know is also these Imams didn't live that long. The longest of them who lived was Imam Malik, who lived around 81 to 82 years old. And then Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, who lived around 78 or 79 years. And then you have Imam Ahmad, who lived around about 75 or 76 years. And then you have Imam Shafi'i, who lived the least, the shortest. He lived only 53 or 54 years. And subhanAllah, his madhab is one of the most impactful in terms of entire populations, in terms of people who essentially have been impacted by him. So it is very important to kind of understand that level of impact of these great Imams. The first of them, of course, lived in Imam Abu Hanifa in 689 CE. We said 80 Hijrah. And then the last of them passed away 780, which is Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So they lived as Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik and Imam Shafi'i lived between two dynasties. They lived between the Umayyad and the Abbasid, meaning they were old enough to live and remember and participate essentially in the politics of these caliphates. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah passed away in the caliphate of the second Khalifa of the Abbasids, Abu Ja'far al-Mansur. He's the second Khalifa. And that means that Imam al-Shafi'i was born in the same year. In fact, it's mentioned by Rabi' ibn Sulaiman, the student of al-Shafi'i, that he was born the same day Imam Abu Hanifa passed away. So al-Shafi'i was born the same day Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah passed away. And that, again, one of the themes that we have in the dawn, you can say the sunset or the passing of one great alim and scholar is the dawn and rise of another. And similarly in Islam, the icons, it was similar like that. Those who essentially passed, you have the dawn of the rise of others. So they lived in a time when the Muslim world was accurately described by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that it was mulkan adhan, as we mentioned already in the hadith in Muslim Imam Ahmad, that there will be Khilafah Rashida, or a golden caliphate that's rightly guided, and then there will be vying kingship, mulkan adhan. Ad means like biting, from ad. So essentially there's vying, competing kingship. Then there will be mulkan jabriyatan, which means tyrannical rule. And then there will be khilafah rashida ala minhaj al-nubuwah. So he said there will be prophethood, nubuwah. Then there will be khilafah rashida. Then there will be mulkan adlan, vying kingship. Then he said there will be mulkan jabriyatan, which is tyrannical rule. Then there will be khilafah ala minhaj al-nubuwah again. There will be khilafah on the prophetic methodology. So this is the 5 levels or 5 stages of Islamic history as mentioned by our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the hadith is Muslim Imam Ahmad. It's authentic. So they lived in a time when there was very much vying kingship. And Imam Shafi'i, when he was born in the era of Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, he was roughly about 11 years old when Abu Ja'far al-Mansur passed and gave his power to Al-Mahdi. And Al-Mahdi lived in a time where there was a lot of, again, sedition and uprising in his time, mainly from Khurasan and Tabaristan. And there was an uneasiness in the Khilafah because of the consistent levels of insurrection, and they had to violently repress them. So you have to understand the political order of the Abbasids was very much with an iron fist. Very much with an iron fist. Okay. So Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, he grew up when, and he was born in Palestine. He was born in Gaza, in the sub-city known as Asqalan. And it's now known today as Ashkelon because, of course, the Zionists have taken it. So he's Ghazawi, he's from Gaza. And he comes from the tribe of Banu Muttalib, the tribe of Banu Hashim. He is the one that's related to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ the most from the 4 Imams. So meaning he's Qurashi, Muttalibi. And his great-grandfather has kinship with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. His father died when he was 2 years old, and his mother recognized that she did not want him to just be lost in the disarray or essentially give him a good upbringing. So she wanted him to be raised under the tutelage of scholars. So she moved her son and her family to Mecca. So he was raised in Mecca. And he studied under the scholars there from a very young age, and he memorized the Quran. And it was known that Imam Shafi'i was sent also to the very fluent, or you could say eloquent, Bedouin tribes of outside of Mecca, so that their speech could be essentially the best. And that's why Imam Shafi'i was known as one of the most eloquent of Imams. And in fact, it is said by some that the era of istishhad, the era of essentially using scholars' speech as evidence for poetry and Arabic grammar and Arabic language, ends with the Shafi'i. So he was the last one they used as essentially the era of Arabic language is proven through the words and the statements of this Imam. I mean, just to give you an idea of how affluent he was. There's a disagreement on this, of course, but this is among some of the sayings of scholars. He grew up in Mecca, so among the lessons that he would learn from was from a scholar whose name was Muslim ibn Khalid al-Zanji. And he was, of course, a freed slave. And Muslim ibn Khalid al-Zanji was among his first teachers. He committed to him, and by 7 years old, he had memorized the Quran. Imam Malik at that time, of course, was very affluent, and his book of hadith became widespread in the Muslim world. So by 10 years old, Imam Shafi'i had memorized it. 1,000 plus a hadith, 1,400 plus a hadith, he memorized it. And he studied with Sufyan ibn Uyayna, who was one of the greatest ulama of Mecca. So he studied with one of the greatest scholars and the fuqaha of Mecca, known as Sufyan ibn Uyayna. And then he went to study under Imam Malik. But not before he reached a level of teaching and learning which allowed him to even give fatwa. He gave fatwa at the age of 15. 15 years old. So you can see this is not by the way, you couldn't say this is normal, like everybody gives fatwa at 15. No, this is actually beyond, the capacity. You can understand his memorization, his skill level, his Arabic language. Finally, he went to study with Imam Malik, and he studied with Imam Malik. He had to, as I told you all before, Imam Malik taught scholars. He didn't just teach regular people. He didn't sit in the masjid teaching just the awam. Why? Because this was the Muslim world at that time. They were at a higher caliber. Everybody essentially went through basic Islamic literacy. So when you went to study with scholars, you already had studied. Like for example, look, who did he study with? He studied with Muslim ibn Khalid al-Zanji. He studied with Sufyan ibn Uyayna, which is one of the greatest scholars of Mecca. Then he felt he's up to the level of Imam Malik. So when he went to Imam Malik, he had to request essentially a favor from the Amir at that time. And the Amir of Medina asked for him that essentially he was young, but essentially he's also his family member, because the Amir is part of what? He's Qurashi. So you get like somebody that you know to get you to speak to the Imam, to essentially give you a word. So essentially when he gets to him, the Amir says to him, this is Shafi'i, Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i, he's from Mecca, and he requests to study with you, and I vouch for him. So when he sat next to him, he's expecting him to open the book and read. So he said, go find someone else to read for you, either from memory, one of his advanced students, etc. He says, no, I'll read myself. So he sat in front of him and he said, read. So he started reading from memory. And then he said, repeat it. And he would repeat from memory. And then he would ask him very smart, poignant questions. This, what about this, and etc. So he recites all of this, and finally, Imam Malik looked at him and he said to him, أنت تحب أن تكون قاضيا. It's as if you want to become a judge, based on his level of smartness and his sharpness. And then he said to him something very beautiful and something very powerful. He says, Ya Muhammad. He said, stop reading. Then he looked at him and he said, Ya Muhammad, إني أرى فيك نورا فلا تظلمه بظلم المعصية. He says, oh Muhammad, I see in you light Allah has put in your heart. Allah has put in you. So don't darken it with the darkness of sin. This is an advice he gave from Imam Malik to Imam al-Shafi'i. And this is where I want to kind of stop for a little bit. It's a beautiful lesson to Imam al-Shafi'i. Let's say he was between the ages of 15 plus, by one of the greatest Imams of our time. And remember, Imam Malik lived the longest, and he saw a lot of political strife in the Muslim world. He saw the toppling of an entire caliphate, the rise of another. He saw his own teachers be imprisoned until they were beaten to death. He himself was under the eyes and watch of the khulafa themselves. So he only could do so much. But he himself stood for the truth, and he was beaten at least once for it, if not twice. And at the same time, Imam Malik stood firm on his principles and became known as one of the greatest fuqaha in the entire world. For what reason? This incident that you see here. This incident that you see here. This incident that you see here teaches you that these Imams understood there's a formula in life. The formula in life is not how much notoriety you get, not how much you are known, not how much status you have, but your status in the eyes of Allah is raised by the amount of righteousness that you have, salah. And the more righteous you are, the more Allah raises you. And the more that you struggle with your own sin, is how the more darkened your life becomes, and hence Allah will not raise people like that. Will keep them at that level. This is from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, says that the most that are going to be tested are the Anbiya. Why? The more righteous you are, the more piety you have, the more taqwa you have, the more you will be tested by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what this hadith says. And that's why in another narration, a man came to the Prophet ﷺ, and the hadith has weakness. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I love you. He says, Undur fima taqul. Aw kama qala. He said, I love you. The Prophet ﷺ said, watch what you say. It's very interesting. So he said, what do you mean? He says, no one says that they love me except that they will be tested the most. And then he says some other things, but the hadith has weakness in it, meaning is relatively true. which is of course the one who has more faith will be tested the most. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ says the prophets will be tested the most, then after them due to their level of piety. So of course, if you look at the life of Imam Malik, it's full of difficulties. It's full of trying to stand for the truth while remaining true to yourself and this ummah. And that's why one of the most powerful things that they did is they stood for it without any kind of self-aggrandizement, self-amazement, or self-promotion. No Muslim knows about their struggles almost. They just know him for his piety. They just know him for his they just know him for his jurisprudence. So I want you to understand how selfless you have to become to be at the level of these imams. And that's what he's teaching Imam Malik at this point in time in just very simple words. He said to him, I see in you light, so don't extinguish it with the darkness of sin. Very simple. And that simple lesson is where like 99% of Muslims, including the one speaking, right, is where we're failing at. We're finding difficulty in. We're having faltering in. Because the difference between us and the Sahaba is one thing. The difference between us and then the ones that came after them, like these four imams, is one thing. And that is sidq ma'allah. That's being truthful with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when people reach the level of being truthful with Allah, they can then control themselves in their shahawat, in their private sins, and their private ibadah, their private hal, which means their private level of spirituality that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala muttali'un ala sariratihi, muttali'un ala qalbihi. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware of them and their secrets, aware of them and their private ways and what their internal thoughts are, what they have in their hearts. They only know. They're constantly muraqabeen, right? They're constantly under watch and they are watchful. Under watch, they know that they're under watch from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they are watchful of themselves constantly with their spirituality. This is the difference between us, and that's the only thing. If you look at anything, this is the only thing. And we as a collective ummah just need to increase that. As a community, as a family, we must increase that. Where do we get to a level where we can say, I am doing okay with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is when you become watchful and you become cautious and you become also fearful of your own spiritual state. So this is the difference between us and them, and this is what he said to Imam Shafi'i. He stayed with Imam Malik until he passed away. So he essentially, you're talking about from 16 years old all the way until he was 81. Okay? This is a long time. And until he passed away. No, it wasn't 16 years old, excuse me. So do the math. He passed away at 53. This was probably in his 30s, not in his teens. So there's a mistake here. In any case, Imam Malik, rahimahullah, also saw the righteousness of Imam Shafi'i while he was young. So one day he told his daughter, there's going to be a scholar who is extremely righteous that's going to come visit us. So I want you to observe them. Okay? So she said, okay. So this person comes, and her daughter, the daughter of Imam Malik, Fatima, was one of the memorizers of the Muwatta. She herself is a student of knowledge, and she's one of the carriers of hadith, so she's observing. So she sees him, and this person that comes in, basically starts shoving food in his face while they're eating. Eating a lot of food, and just continuously going at it. And this is not sunnah, you're supposed to eat 1/3. Right? Then she says, okay, I'm going to place water by his bedside so that in the morning, not in the morning, in the evening when he gets up to pray at night, he can make wudu at tahajjud. So anyways, the morning comes, they go off to pray Fajr. Where they pray Fajr? Masjid al-Nabawi, the Prophet's masjid. So she looks, the water was not even used. The water wasn't even used. She's like, what kind of person is this? And she said, okay, the whole night, she's expecting the candle to be lit. The candle wasn't even lit. She didn't pray at night even. I said, A'udhu Billah, right? This is to a society of righteousness a big deal. So then Imam Malik, when he came back, he said to his daughter, so what did you learn from observing this person? So she said, he was nobody. Who did you bring yesterday? He's just shoving food in his face, didn't have any kind of discretion for the adab, the sunnahs of eating. He didn't pray at night. He didn't even make wudu in the morning. What kind of person is this? So the Imam Malik smiled and he said, he'll come back today, so you can ask him yourself. So that person comes back that day, and Fatima ibn Malik, bint Malik, she says, well, why did you eat so quickly and so much food yesterday? And the guy smiled and says, when you're invited to the home of someone that you know that 100% the food is halal and the rizq is halal from Allah, then you want as much of the barakah in your body. And this is, by the way, not just, okay, the food is halal, like the meat is halal, but the way it was earned, the way it was prepared. I mean, like the whole shebang of halal. We sometimes look at, was the meat halal? No. Well, how was it earned? How is that halal earned? That's also depending on how halal it is in the sight of Allah, right? So imagine, when she heard that was an amazing thought. She's like, okay, so I want to increase the barakah of eating Imam Malik's food. And that's why I kept eating as much as I could. Because I know this is 100% halal if it's coming from this house. SubhanAllah. Then she says, okay, what about the whole night? You didn't even light up the candle so you can pray. And I put water for you to make wudu. You didn't make wudu when you woke up. Forget the prayer in the night. So he said that I was thinking of a fiqh mas'ala from a hadith. How many issues can I derive? How many benefits can I derive from this hadith? And I was thinking about the entire night until I woke up. Until I got up. He didn't sleep. So he said the entire night, he was on the wudu from Isha, and he just went and prayed Fajr on that wudu. He didn't lose his wudu, basically. He didn't sleep. And he was thinking about one hadith the entire night and deriving benefits from it. So, subhanAllah, as you all know, that praying is a great reward, especially in the night. The Prophet Muhammad says that the one who wakes up in the middle of the night, at the end of the night, the last third of the night, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives special audience to these people. Allah says at that portion of the night, who is there that will ask so I can give? Who is there to seek forgiveness so I can forgive them? So this is a very special time of night, the last 1/3 of the night. Okay? So imagine, this is such an important time, then why is what Imam Shafi'i did more rewarding in the sight of Allah? And this is the difference where we need to understand. You doing an act of worship which is only going to benefit you is called ibadah qasira. Ibadah qasira. Qasira. Which means it is only going to benefit you. Okay? But if you're going to do an act of worship which is going to benefit other people, it's called ibadah muta'addiyah. Meaning it's going to benefit more people. For example, if you were to give charity to a cause which is going to feed people a lot, or you're going to come to, for example, celebrate an event which you essentially prepare and benefit in some way, this is going to benefit a lot of other people. In this case, the act of worship which is more beneficial than praying at night is seeking knowledge and deriving knowledge and reviewing knowledge. Why? Because this scholar, spending the entire night thinking over one hadith, is deriving for us benefits which will benefit the entire ummah. So he said out of one hadith, that night he came out with 60 or so points of benefit. Just thinking about the hadith, which requires time. It's not just like, it doesn't come ChatGPT now, right? Even then, by the way, ChatGPT is not like Imam Shafi'i. 100%. So I'm relaying to you this to show you how the scholars taught Islamic knowledge and how they also taught it to their families. It was lived experience. It was lived experience. And that's something I think we as a community need to revive. We must revive this kind of lived experience. It's not just about teaching and just like going home and coming back. There's got to be some kind of format of being able to learn from each other this aspect of Islam, and which is very, very important. The lived experience of Islam is in a community which practices the prophetic example. So in any case, Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala once Imam Malik passed away, he became known among people. Not only was he a student of Imam Malik, but also he was one of the brightest, and he was also the student of multiple ulama, multiple scholars. Sufyan ibn Uyayna, I told you, he's also at the rank of and level of Imam Shafi'i and others. So therefore, the Abbasids wanted to take him as an ally. So what did they do? They made him the Amir of a southern part of the Arabian Peninsula known as Najran. So he became the Amir there. Okay? Now, this was in the time of Harun al-Rashid. Okay? In the time of Harun al-Rashid. So let me just backtrack for you so you understand where we are at. So we have Al-Mahdi. Okay? And we have Al-Hadi and then Harun al-Rashid. So the Abbasid Khulafa start off like this way. As-Saffah founded the Abbasids. Then you have Al-Mansur. Then you have Al-Mahdi. And then you have Al-Hadi. Al-Mahdi was essentially one of the Khulafa that essentially had to deal with a lot of the sedition. Had to deal with a lot of the sedition, a lot of the uprisings in his time that Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala lived in. So you have, again, after him came Al-Hadi, his son. He was half Afghan. Today's Afghan day, apparently. I have to mention this. I'm just kidding. But the point being is, his wife was from Herat. She was a concubine. And he ended up having two sons from her. Actually, multiple children. Two of the sons that came from her became the Khulafa of the Abbasids. The son Al-Hadi and Harun al-Rashid. Harun al-Rashid is half Persian from this woman. So anyways, Harun al-Rashid was known as one of the more, you could say, better Abbasid Khulafa. In his time, it was the flowering of the Abbasids and acceptance of knowledge and flourishing of knowledge and poetry, and much of what you know about the Abbasids happened around the era of Harun al-Rashid. Why? Because his father was so used to quelling sedition, and basically it's even said that he killed up to 7,000 in Tabaristan, crushing one uprising. So this was, it took about 3 of the Khulafa to just quell the uprisings of not only the outer portions of the Abbasid Khilafah, but also the Alawis. In any case, you have Harun al-Rashid, who essentially asked him to become the leader, and then of course there was a problem. Harun al-Rashid called him to stand trial for basically a charge that he was being blamed for, that he was supporting rebellions against the Abbasids from Najran. So Imam Shafi'i gave an impassioned and eloquent defense in front of the Khalifa and in front of a judge whose name was Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani. Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani was a student of Imam Abu Hanifa, direct student. And he also happened to be a student of Imam Malik. So he was the judge and Harun al-Rashid was the Khalifa, and Imam Shafi'i came and he gave an eloquent speech. And he basically said, I, Muhammad ibn Idris, and he mentioned his entire lineage all the way to Abdul Muttalib. This is who I am. He says, I have nothing to do with these people, and I have been given a position which I'm only fulfilling. Meaning I have no reason to basically be involved in this. And he did this, by the way, also for another reason, so he could tell the Abbasids that I'm basically related to you. So, why would I have an uprising against you? I'm from Banu Abdul Muttalib and you're from Banu Hashim as well. Both of them are from Banu Hashim. So he's like, I have no reason to basically go after it. So Harun al-Rashid turns to Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani and he says, is what he's saying true, and do you vouch for him? He says, I vouch for him and I will speak for him, so release him. So Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani was one of the reasons why Sheikh Muhammad Idris al-Shafi'i was released from prison. But Harun al-Rashid insisted that Imam al-Shafi'i remain and teach in Baghdad and stay in Baghdad for two reasons. Of course, he loves knowledge and he loves the position of Imam Shafi'i, but he also wants to keep him under watch. So he doesn't, he's well known. He has now position of Amir. And what do you think the whole world is going to be talking about, the Muslim world? Okay, Harun al-Rashid released him, but he's also now appointed him as a teacher. You have to understand the political impact here. So he stayed in Baghdad, and this actually helped him, because Baghdad was a center of knowledge, and hence it brought him more students, even more students. And he decided to stay away from politics for the remainder of his life. It's like, okay, politics is enough for me. I was Amir of Najran, and that got him into trouble. Remember that the Abbasids, any movement that happened anywhere, they would be immediately jumping on that to make sure that it doesn't cause any more problems. He also became a student of Imam Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani for 3 years. So he now studied with a student of Imam Abu Hanifa. So Abu Hanifa's students studied with Imam Malik, and Shafi'i studied under him as well, to further add to his knowledge of Sharia and fiqh. He then returned back to Mecca, and he studied there for 9 years. So you can see he's moving around a lot. And this is a time when a young student who became known as the fourth Imam essentially made contact with him. And his name is Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Ahmad ibn Hanbal was the fourth greatest Imam, and he's the one who essentially made contact with him, even though while he was in Iraq at the time of Imam Shafi'i, he met him in Mecca. And he studied with him at some portion of his life. And we'll talk about him in a little bit more. He returned to Baghdad for a short period of time and found the new Khalifa al-Ma'mum had very unorthodox beliefs, and he would persecute anyone that did not follow these beliefs. What was the belief? He was spreading around the idea that the Quran was created. The Quran is a creation, created being. It is not the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's created. So this created speech of Allah. Was the speech of Allah created, or is it part of the attributes of Allah? This became a huge debate. So among the people that essentially stood unwavering that the Quran is not created. In fact, if you ask some Muslims today, is the Quran created? They probably will say yes. Because they don't even know this debate. This was a huge debate. And the Khalifa would imprison people if you did not agree with it. Okay, so we believe the Quran is the spoken word of Allah Azza wa Jalla. It is the speech of Allah. It's not created. Okay, so you might be like, what is this very small difference? To Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, this issue meant that you're changing what is true belief, what is the belief of Ahlul Sunnah. So he stood firm on it, and a number of scholars. And they went to prison, and they got beat. So Imam Shafi'i started this problem. He's like, look, I said I'm done with politics. I'm going to step away from Baghdad and this whole issue. I don't want to get in the problem with this issue. So he went to Egypt. And when he returned to Egypt, this is where he was able to now be exposed to the scholarly tradition of the scholars of Egypt at that time. Al-Layth ibn Sa'ad and many of the remnants of students, and also the hadith that was spread there. And this is why his entire views changed when he went to Egypt. So his madhab, which is known as his school, the formulation of his thoughts and his opinions changed. Why? Because he was exposed to other scholars, and therefore this exposed his knowledge to things that he had not known before, for example. So some of the views that he espoused changed, and hence why Imam Shafi'i has two schools. One of them is known as Al-Qadim, and this one is called Al-Jadid. The old madhab and the new madhab. Okay, and that's simply because he was exposed to more knowledge. Okay? And in this time period is when you have many of his students that carried on his legacy, and because of those students, they are who they are now. So among them like Al-Muzani, among them like Rabi' ibn Sulaiman, these people carried on his legacy to this day. If it wasn't for those students, these great students, then Imam Shafi'i probably would just be another scholar you quote. But because of his legacy being left by very, very strong students, that is what essentially made Imam Shafi'i stand. He was a very eloquent poet, of course, and his poetry is memorized to this day. There's a diwan, which means a collection of his poetry, and among the things he said, إذا حار أمرك في معنيين ولم تدري فيما الخطأ والصواب فخالف هواك فإن الهوى يقود النفوس إلى ما يعاب. If you're caught in confusion between two matters, and you don't know what is right and what is wrong, at that point disobey your desires. Because desires only lead the soul to what's blameworthy and wrong. That if you don't know what you want to do, and you don't have direction in what is right or not, just go against whatever your desires are until that's very clear. Now obviously, this does not mean in areas of Islam there's absolute clarity. There's a halal, there's a haram. So the answer to that is to go to a scholar to ask. But this is in matters where you don't know whether doing this or pursuing this is right or not. You might want to go against your desire, because your desire is blameworthy and will lead you to what is wrong. And again, this is based on a million things, so just don't take it as a general, unless you ask, of course. He would also say, سافر تجد عوضا عمن تفارقه وانصب فإن لذيذ العيش في النصب. Travel, you will find a replacement for what you leave behind, and strive, because the joy of living is in striving. Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala wrote his madhab. So this is among the differences between him and the other three madhab. Imam Malik wrote some of his opinions in the hadith chapters and also passed it off to his students. The students recorded it. Imam Abu Hanifa did the same thing. He passed off to his views to his students, and the students recorded it. Imam Shafi'i wrote it. So there's two books which are extremely important. One of them is called Al-Risala, which talks about his principles of deriving rulings. How do you derive rulings? How do you know this is halal? How do you know this is mustahab, recommended? How do you know this is an obligation? How do you know this is just for disliked? He wrote all of that. The principles of how these are derived. Just, you know, this is recommended or this is an obligation. You know this is haram and this is just disliked. And here, his other book is, of course, literally known as the mother. Why? Because he wrote in it all of his opinions. Okay? His opinions is written in Al-Umm. So this is the difference between him and all the other madhahib. Imam Ahmad did not have a written book. And hence why there are so many different opinions narrated from Imam Ahmad, because some of his students met him before, some of his students met him later. So they all recorded his opinions. Sometimes he would change his opinion. And this does not mean that, as you saw, Imam Shafi'i changed his opinion. But there's a difference between what he died upon and what he had earlier. You understand? So we know what's old and what's new. Imam Ahmad, you don't have that really. So Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, he left behind this amazing legacy. He died in Cairo at the age of 54. Just very young. Very, very young. Left over 100 books. And he also left a legacy of written scholarship, which essentially became the foundations of all Islamic law. This great Imam. Okay? Then you have Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Imam Ahmad was, of course, different in many, many different ways, in the perspective of he was known to have traveled the most out of all of them, even more than a Shafi'i. And that is because at a young age, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal essentially had to work to commit to knowledge, and among the ways that he worked was to be a book copier. So he would copy books. So he would go to a city, he would copy books the day, and then he would seek knowledge while he was studying. Other than that, so he would make money by copying these books. He lost his father when he was 3 years old. So you can also see a trend here. All of them were orphans. All of them were orphans, with the exception of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. But the idea was that they all lost their fathers when they were young. He was 3 years old, Imam Shafi'i was 2, and Imam Malik also was young when he lost his father. When he was 10 years old, he memorized the entire Quran and started to study hadith. And he studied with Imam Abu Hanifa's other student. His name was Abu Yusuf al-Qali. So you can see that Imam Shafi'i studied with Imam Abu Hanifa's student, And Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal studied with Imam Abu Hanifa's student. He studied with him for 2 years. But he wasn't really fond of it. He wasn't really fond of the madrasa or the school of Imam Abu Hanifa and their reliance on logic. Their reliance on basically intellectual reasoning. He just wasn't fond of it. It's known for that. But he knew that he loved hadith, and hence he studied and traveled to Mecca, to Medina, to Yemen, and to Syria. He traveled a lot. And he gathered from many of the great scholars of hadith. One of the great scholars he collected from, his name is Abdul Razak al-San'ani. He's from Yemen. And when he would remember Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, he used to cry. Why? He said that this young man used to be an imam during the day and then read hadith, and he didn't have enough food to eat while he was basically going to sleep. Okay? So he met Imam al-Shafi'i, like I said to you all, and then he joined him in Baghdad. And Imam al-Shafi'i helped Imam Ahmad in something that was the crux of scholarship. Why? Everyone was busy in memorization. But al-Shafi'i had a critical analysis that other scholars did not. So he taught him how to essentially think and reflect over the hadith and the Quran, which was what the Imams essentially surpassed each other over, the reflection and critical analysis of the hadith. So, and also the principles and deriving rulings itself. Remember, Shafi'i was the one who kind of like formed this, what's known as usul al-fiqh. Right? How do we derive these principles of this is haram, this is an obligation, this is just recommended? This existed from the time of the Prophet Muhammad, but Imam al-Shafi'i is the one who wrote it down. This is how the principles are derived according to the Sahaba, and so on and so forth. So, when Imam al-Shafi'i left Baghdad and he went to Egypt, remember? He left with having said the following words. He said, I'm leaving Baghdad when there's no one more pious or righteous, nor a greater jurist than Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. And that's a big statement. You know why? Because you have many of the students of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, Muhammad bin Hassan's students, and you have Abu Yusuf, the other student of Imam Hanifa, their students are left, and he says no one is greater than Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. And no one is more righteous than him as well. And of course, there's another reason why. You have to understand that at the time, Imam Ahmad was among the scholars that stood against the Khalifa over that issue regarding the creation of the Quran. So this is a way of him like making a political statement without making a political statement. Because what did he say? He said righteousness and his knowledge of fiqh, which basically says I support him, but you know what? I'm not going to basically face off with the Khalifa either. He just left. He didn't want to deal with it. So Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah ta'ala, had to face what would be referred to as the mihna. The mihna. The mihna is known as putting Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal under trial for 10 years imprisonment and torture and punishment and etc. All because he didn't want to say the Quran was created. So, although Ma'mun himself, the Khalifa at that time, was vital towards the establishment of Baghdad and the Abbasids as an intellectual center, he was known for the flourishing of Islamic civilization. He set it back intellectually when he insisted on this because some of the advisors in his court happened to be deviant, unorthodox. They held heretical beliefs, bid'ah, essentially the belief of this. And this is from a group known as the Mu'tazila. The Mu'tazila, okay? So the Mu'tazila were impacted by Greek philosophy, but they tried to refute Greek philosophy using Greek philosophy. So one of the principles of Greek philosophy is that everything is either a body or an accident. Meaning everything is either created or something moved and created it. Right? So if everything is a creation, then what is the Quran? If you physically hold it, they say then the Quran is created. This is why they came up with this. You might be that doesn't make logical sense. What are you talking about? The actual mushaf that you hold in your hand, that's created, of course. But the words that are said in the Quran is recited. How can that be created? It's the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? To you, because you're saying right and you're shaking your head like obviously, that's why Imam Ahmad went to prison and got beat for 10 years. If he didn't make that stance, the entire ummah would have been misguided, because it would have became Abbasid law. So anyways, and this is why Imam Ahmad essentially stood out against him. There was a number of scholars even that stood with Al-Ma'mun. They were all Mu'tazili, or some of them just stayed quiet, and others essentially who stood on his behalf. Now, he got imprisoned to the point that they used to beat him. And he almost lost patience at that because of those beatings. So they said that a thief came to him. And a thief, Imam Ahmad said, there's no one that I benefited from his advice more than a thief in prison. So what was that? While he was getting beat, he said, this thief came and said, Imam Ahmad, be patient and bear it with patience. He says, look at me. I'm being beaten for something I did wrong. And I'm being patient with it because I deserve it. I deserve to get beat for this. He says, you're the Imam who's standing for the truth. How can you lose patience? So stand and take it with patience. So he said, his words made me the most patient after that. And there's the teacher of our teacher, Ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah. He had stomach cancer. I think he had pancreatic cancer or something, prostate cancer, I think. So anyways, our teacher, Sheikh Yasser Rajas, who's here, he's the Imam in Dallas, Valley Ranch, and others, they narrated this for us, and also one of my teachers in Medina, who's a student. He said that when he used to have severe stomach pain towards the end of his life, it's like on his deathbed, he would ask his students to take out Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, the section of Imam Ahmad, when he was getting beat, and the story was told to him, so that it could give him patience. He's like, look, Imams got beat to stand for the truth, and I'm going through difficulty and pain. That's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's qadr Allah, there's nothing we can do, right? So he said this actually gave him more patience when he used to read these lessons. So subhanAllah, this shows you that these Imams didn't give all this for free that you're listening to. At the time that he was house arrested, he says that, and he was getting beaten. You know who Imam Ahmad used to think about also to give him patience? He said, I used to cry remembering Abu Hanifa when he was in prison. Allahu Akbar. Remembering Abu Hanifa, he got imprisoned by two different khulafa, two different caliphates. The Umayyads beat him and the Abbasids beat him until he died, as you all know, in prison. Or just outside of prison, and he died after that. But in any case, there's four reasons why he died. So he said, I used to remember Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah. He then was house arrested and let go at some point. And what happened was, the Khalifa died. And when the Khalifa died, that is when the mihna ended. But while he was under house arrest, no one could see him. And this was one of the greatest difficulties for a teacher. You're in your house and you can't teach. So there was a student, he came to visit him from Spain. And his name was Baqi ibn Makhlad. Baqi ibn Makhlad from Spain wrote or collected the largest hadith collection in human history. Baqi ibn Makhlad. It was known to be 60 volumes. Over 100,000 hadith. And the whole thing is lost. The whole thing is lost. Right? So when I first heard this, I said, how can it be lost? We lost hadith? The answer is no. Why? Because all the hadith he collected came from Imam Ahmad, came from others. So all of the hadith is preserved from what we have. Those things like you lose hadith when you lose a large collection like this. Alhamdulillah. They're present in other works, in other collections. So in any case, he was the one that came from all the way from Spain to Iraq, and he found this is the mihna time, Imam Ahmad is in house arrest. So he would actually go and pretend to be a beggar. And he would knock on the door of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, where he would open the door, he said, narrate to me hadith. He would narrate to me hadith, he'd walk out. And he would do this every so in a while. And guess what? Y'all are laughing now? We live in Medina now in the same exact situation. Where the tyrants are basically banning scholars, ulama who have been teaching in Masjid Nabawi for 40, 50 years plus. They have been banned from teaching, all of them, except the ones that are appointed by by a certain king and his people and so on and so forth. So now I am not joking with you. There are students that go to the teacher's masjid, and they go to him as if they're just asking a question so they can read a book to him and they can leave. People go to their homes as if they are literally like in Nazi Germany. Literally, right now, we're speaking right now. Meaning you have to know you like very well, and you come to his house as a guest. 1, 2, 3 knocks. And you have to make sure no one's watching, and your shoes can't be outside. And this is, you think I'm joking? This is right now. Right now. So the same difficulties that the ulama, the scholars went through in the past with umara are the same difficulties we have today. Right? So subhanAllah, he did not take money for anything he went through. When the Khalifa changed, the policies changed. Democrats one day, Republicans another. It's basically the same thing, right? So the Khalifa changed. They convinced him that this was a heterodoxical, this was a false belief that the Quran is created or not. And Imam Ahmad was then praised. They used to say to him while he was in prison, if you just give a word, there's 5,000 people outside of the prison just waiting for you. Just waiting for you. For an uprising, for rebellion. He refused. He refused. He didn't want to cause rebellion and sedition against the Khilafah for that. But rather, he said that this must be rectified. So in any case, Imam Ahmad after that became very, very famous. To the extent that they said 3 to 500 would just narrate his hadith from his students, and 5,000 people would sit just watch him what he's saying. Watch him what he's saying, what he's speaking about. Among the books that he wrote, of course, is the famous, the collection of hadith known as Musnad Imam Ahmad. Musnad Imam Ahmad is the largest collection of hadith we have today. It is not the largest collection in Islamic history, because why? It was the students that had the largest from Spain. His is 40,000 hadith. And 10,000 are repeated, meaning he just brought different chains. So, total 30,000 without repetition. It's very large. And it's organized by the narrator. So Abu Bakr's hadith, and Umar's hadith, and Ibn Umar, and Aisha. That's what a musnad is. And it is among the works that if you read it, this is considered among the greatest achievements, to read the Musnad Imam Ahmad to your teacher. And of course, it carries very interesting hadith, which are rare, not found in sometimes the other works. And hence why it is a precious jewel Allah preserved to this day. Allah preserved to this day. He spent his life teaching. He wrote another book, which I am translating, inshallah. Make dua for whenever it's released. It's called Kitab Az-Zuhd. The book of Az-Zuhd. And this is what we will end with, inshallah ta'ala, speaking about this concept. Az-Zuhd means that you detach from the material world. It's called asceticism, right? A detachment. And this concept was very important to the earlier generations. Why? Because they became very wealthy. In the time of the Umayyads and the Abbasid, the height of the Umayyads, you could say, is Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. And the height of the Abbasids were around Harun al-Rashid and afterward. So they were very wealthy, extremely wealthy. So what happens is when there's a massive amount of wealth, this becomes one of the early fitnas of the Muslim empire. Decadence and this materialism, and people had just massive wealth. And what happens when Muslims have massive? They just get bored. They start doing things, or having pink Ferraris and these kind of things. Why? You go to Muslim countries. What do you see? You see pink Lamborghini, pink Ferrari. Like, what are you doing? You have nothing else to do because they're just bored, right? So decadence and overt lavishness and glamour start to pierce into the hearts of Muslims, and that's what becomes a greatest trial and fitna to their hearts and their faith. So hence this earliest group of scholars, in their spirituality, they wrote the first books in spirituality on this topic exactly. Kitab Az-Zuhd. So you have Az-Zuhd by Ibn al-Mubarak. You have the Kitab Az-Zuhd by Imam Ahmad, and so on and so forth. This was among the first works of spirituality in the Muslim world, for the reason that the Muslim world was tested with attachment to materialism. You guys understand? So hence why this is an extremely important book. This is narrations of the earlier scholars before them and the Sahaba, which essentially taught them how to remain detached from from the material. And this is the earlier workings of the earlier generations. What they used to do is they used to, in practice of detaching from the material, they actually physically practiced that. How? Some of them would wear wool only for like a year. And that's where the word Sufism comes from, essentially. You heard the word Sufism? The reason why is because part of their spiritual training, in order to detach from the material, like Ibrahim ibn Adham, who's one of the wealthiest from the family of Umara. When he became spiritually inclined, you know what he did? He wore wool for an entire year. Wool. And the reason for that is that, yes, you by nature love brand name things. Don't you love brand name? Once you actually taste it, you're like, hey, it's actually good quality. It's not just the name. It's actually good quality. So one of the things that they did is they practiced detaching from the name brand, more or less. Right? So this decadence, this massive amount of luxury, they decided to live simpler. And this is where you see the whole movement today. What do you think minimalism comes from? They're just another word for Sufism, basically. Literally. This minimalism people are engaged in. I'm just like, subhanAllah, just go study Islam, you'll be fine after that. You know what I'm saying? And humanism, and we gotta detach from all just go study the works of the earlier scholars of Islam. It's the exact same from a spiritual angle. All they're doing is replacing the word Allah with nature and all these other weird things, right? So I want you to just understand how the scholars in the past, they practiced this at a very, very practical level, and they lived in luxury, but they did not ever engage in it. So part of that is a physical manifestation. You have to physically detach. If you don't physically detach, you can say it as much as you want, you can sit there and practice it, you can sit there and be as minimal as you want. It's just going to affect you, it's going to impact you. So part of those two things is, part of that in doing that is not just like debranding. Try to do that. Try to debrand yourself. Like, okay, I'm really attached to this brand I really love. Like, step off a little bit from it. Practice that. Another way is what they used to do is they used to remove from their hearts israf and tabdhir. Israf is extravagance and tabdhir is wastefulness. So you know how you you got a shoe, you got your Jordans, all right, mashallah, Allahumma barak, or your Armani or whatever, but you want another one in a different color. You got your polo shirt, but you want like 5 of them in the same color. I have a problem with this, I know. I'm speaking to myself right now, all right? So I'm being as practical with you as possible. You love to have the same thing in multiple, why? Why? Okay, it's on sale. Now I understand. Okay, fine, it's on sale. But I'm just saying to you, cut down on the wastefulness. You have the money, you have the ability, but you should cut down on being wasteful. This is the impact of these 4 Imams that they left behind. And Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala, on his deathbed, they had very, very little. They were scrupulous in that essence. But they left behind a legacy. 1 million people attended the janazah of Imam Ahmad in Baghdad. 1 million people. And they said that his janazah was where one of the famous quotes came. At that time it was the most witnessed, or you could say attended janazah in Islamic history. No one could speak for the janazah of Imam Ahmad at that time, and that's where the famous statement came that the janazahs are a witness for Islam. Basically the amount of people that attend. And of course, as you know, that there's much more that came afterward. But with that, and hoping that we've studied the lives of the 4 Imams at a social, political kind of lens, and also from a spiritual angle, that we also kind of realize what made them people that we look up to. Number 1, their sacrifices. They sacrificed all of this so that we can have Islam. Imam Shafi'i died at 54. How much did he sacrifice for just Islam? They spent their youth in Islam. And that's why one of my friends and teachers, and let's say he's a teacher as well, he's a very beautiful person. He lives in Mecca, and I always used to ask him, when are you going to go back to America? When are you going back and teach people? He's like, I'm here now to allow my children to be the ulama that I did not get a chance to become. You know what he's doing? He's sacrificing for his own children to learn and to reach the levels of what we're listening and hearing from the 4 Imams. They're living in Mecca, they're living in Medina, they're living in these societies. So we can also learn, you don't necessarily need to do that at that level, but also what level of sacrifice are you doing? Like, alhamdulillah, you guys are sacrificing your Wednesday night, come to study. This is an important sacrifice. This is an important sacrifice. So when there's a gathering of knowledge, there's a gathering that you need to bring your family to, so on and so forth. And this is part of an engagement. As a Muslim society, we need to sacrifice more. And lastly, part of this series that we will be discussing, icons and leaders of faith, is to speak about these stories to the young. So they have someone to look up to. Say, oh, subhanAllah, look what they did. They stood against tyrants. They stood against those who speak evil and against injustice. So inshallah, we understand that just as we need a role model, so do our next generation. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless these 4 Imams and allow us to follow in their footsteps and to grant this ummah like them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala purify our hearts and allow us to become elevated through our righteousness and allow us to be rectified in our private affairs. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give victory to our brothers and sisters in Gaza and in Palestine and everywhere where they are suffering in the world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring honor to Ummah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin wa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa jazakumullahu khairan jazaa.